explain spiritual warfare as a Christian obsessed with brain science and why things may feel worse after you give your life to God. Because there are actual changes happening in your literal brain as you embark on this journey. So let's backtrack. We spoke about how the brain is one of God's most complex designs. It has 86 billion neurons, and each neuron can form thousands of connections, meaning that it creates a network of trillions of connections. If you think that outer space and the gazillion stars are impressive, think about the masterpiece in your own skull. Anyways, the brain is still a mystery, but it's very clear that in God's original design, it was meant to glorify Him. But when sin entered, the brain was corrupted, to say the least. Remember, the brain dictates our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings, our memories. The brain literally controls our physical body. And this is what the enemy is after. If he can control your mind through outside influences, he can control your life. I'm going to make a couple points. So point number one, how does our brain dictate our thoughts and our behaviors? Well, we have something called neural pathways. This is what it looks like. And essentially, these are thought patterns that act like trails in the brain. Before we gave our life to God, we were pretty much on autopilot. We were shaped by sin, by our trauma, by our circumstances, by worldly influences. These repetitive thoughts and behavior created strong neural pathways, and the stronger that the pathway is, the harder it is to break. When you give your life to God, naturally, you want your behaviors and your thoughts to align with His. But this means breaking those old, deeply ingrained pathways and building new ones. It's literally deconstructing and rebuilding. Imagine having to tear down a huge house and having to start all over from the ground up. Tearing it down looks ugly and messy and all over the place, and rebuilding it is going to take a lot of patience and hard work. And here's the thing, your brain is wired for efficiency, so it's going to resist change. Breaking those old pathways feels like an actual battle because your brain is fighting to stay in the easier, more familiar patterns that it's been following for years. It wants to survive with the least amount of effort. This is where the amygdala, the part of the brain that's connected to fear, survival, and whatnot, get activated. It sends signals of discomfort, doubt, and fear in order to keep you in your comfort zone. Meanwhile, you have one part of the brain working to maintain those old habits, and other parts of the brain trying to guide you towards better decisions. I'm not going to bore you with all the terminology, but it literally is a tug of war in your mind. And this is why it's important to take small baby steps instead of overwhelming your brain by trying to change everything at once. And beating yourself up during the process actually makes those negative neural pathways stronger. Becoming more Christ-like requires patience and intention because you're challenging the program that's been running your system ever since you were born. Your brain is like a computer. When you try to change the software, it's going to glitch at first until it adapts. And even though the enemy cannot actually step into your mind, he uses external influences like music, toxic relationship, vices, addiction, media to create strong patterns in your mind that are difficult to break. Once your mind is hooked, it becomes very hard to rewire it. If you notice, most sin leads to actual addiction and alter our brain chemistry. Whether it's drinking, smoking, overeating, pornography, or even toxic relationships. These addictions keep us chasing for that dopamine rush, again connected to the brain, and the enemy knows that it can keep us stuck. And when you decide to let go of these things, you might get withdrawal symptoms. Which is another thing that makes this whole thing a mental battle. Whether it's substances, behaviors, or even people, your brain begins to miss what it's used to, even if it's not good for you. Point number two, again, your brain is like a computer and it stores every single one of your experiences. The good, the bad, the trauma, the pain, the memories. It's not just stored in your brain, it's actually stored in your nervous system as well. Before giving your life to God, you might have used all those vices to numb all of those feelings. But following God requires you to face all of those things that you have been avoiding. These things did not just disappear just because you numbed it. They've actually been stored in your brain, in your subconscious. And when you decide to take your journey with God and healing seriously, all of these files start to come back up. Memories that you thought you forgot start to flood your way. The parts of your brain where all of these memories are stored start to bring it to light. And your emotional response may be heightened, making you feel all of that pain that you've been avoiding. This can feel super overwhelming because you don't know what it's like to feel these things again because you have been avoiding it and numbing it, but it's actually necessary for true healing. Things feel more intense when you give your life to God because you're finally facing all the things that you've been running away from for years. It feels uncomfortable because you haven't actually processed it or resolved it. Think about a beach ball. The more that you push it down in the water, the harder it's going to burst up to surface. It's the same thing with everything you thought you buried in your subconscious. And following God brings it to light. Healing with God requires you to stop numbing yourself, to face your pain, and to fully let it go. And this is why you're not meant to go through this journey alone. Fellowship, prayer, and learning emotional regulation is key so that you don't overwhelm yourself and send yourself into a mental spiral as you face all of these ugly traumas and pain and make your anxiety and negative thought patterns worse. Because it can get ugly really quickly. We were not taught how to deal with our emotions properly. Instead, we were influenced by the world to use all of these vices to cope with the pain. We grew up watching people suppressing their feelings and distracting themselves from whatever they were going through. Mental health was never discussed or taught, and emotional regulation was never a priority. That's why it's so easy to get stuck in patterns of anxiety and depression, because nobody's talking about it. And we've never been given the tools to actually manage them. And now we give our lives to God, and we're forced to face all of these things because we're meant to face these things so that we can heal and let go and actually transform and live in our purpose instead of living in trauma and survival. It's literally part of the process. But thank God, because He gave us the blueprint in order to change our minds and be renewed and transformed. Following God means letting Him bring things to light that were already there. And the longer that we avoid it, the scarier it's going to feel. I can attest that the other side of all of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom from the pain and the trauma that we've been carrying around. Freedom in Christ. Remember, you're not supposed to change all of these things at once. That's why you feel like you're going crazy, like you're spiraling. And you are not meant to do this alone. I cannot stress this enough. Stop getting so stuck in your head and find support and find ways to emotionally regulate in a healthy way. And watch how much stronger you're going to feel against all of this spiritual warfare.